Section 4. Quantum Explanations of Choice. Hodgson attempts to produce a formula for a conscious system. He says it must have the following two features. Firstly, it must represent within the system or some part of the world as presently encountered. For example, a potential food source. And secondly, it must create within the system at least two alternative possible responses to the representation, and these potential responses must be A, individually linked with the goals of the system, and B, in quantum mechanical superposition. Hodgson insists that if a brain or other physical system does not have properties which provide for both 1 and 2, then it will not be conscious. I say this on the grounds that the usefulness of consciousness appears to lie in the capacity it gives to make choices on the basis of fallible qualitative comparisons of wholes. This phrase, fallible qualitative comparisons of wholes, Hodgson later defines as meaning both that A, the comparisons being made should be unaffected by spatial separation, and B, the outcome should not be mechanistically determined. These two conditions can be achieved, he says, if the wholes to be compared are in quantum physical superposition. The fact that this is the case is what drove evolution to select physical structures which exploited this useful feature of quantum mechanics, resulting in the emergence of consciousness. This quantum theory of free will does not require recourse to the sort of dualist approach to freedom of choice as proposed, for example, by John Eccles. Specifically, Hodgson is keen to reject any postulation of some immaterial entity which makes the real decisions using some other faculty apart from the human brain. Hodgson is clear that the human brain, viewed purely as a physical object, even a quantum physical object, does not choose between the alternatives which it throws up for decision. Rather, the physical brain is a manifestation of the underlying reality of the corresponding quantum physical state function. This reality is also manifested in the subjective world of consciousness. So both the chooser and a faculty by which the choice is made can be located in just this same underlying reality. The most complete objective physical description of this reality, if it could be given, would be in terms of a multi-particle quantum physical state, while the best subjective description would be in terms of the language of folk psychology, which can of course be progressively refined and improved. This reality in its subjective manifestation does comprehend the choice and also explain it to the greatest extent that an explanation can be given. In terms of the agency of action, Hodgson identifies a subject or an experiencer actor as being what makes the choices, and one may regard the quantum reality underlying both physical and mental events as providing the faculty for making these choices. However, he does not contend that the experiencer actor is necessarily a continuing, unchanging self, much less an immortal soul. Hodgson instead suggests that the conscious self may be some sort of combination of many conscious subsystems. He further suggests that the experiences and actions of these subsystems may not always be fully integrated into those of the self-conscious being each of us takes himself or herself to be. It may be possible, Hodgson continues, that decisions can be made by such subsystems without the participation of the fully integrated self-conscious mind. He says, "Indeed, I have suggested that an essential characteristic of consciousness is the possibility of making decisions between superposed alternatives on the basis of some kind of holistic comparison. It would not therefore be surprising if a simple response to a stimulus was performed by a subsystem. This subsystem's conscious experience and response would subsequently be integrated into the consciousness of the overall conscious self. On the other hand, accepting that choices can be made by conscious subsystems without participation of the full self-conscious mind, this does not mean that there is no unity of mind. It seems clear that there is in every normal human being a substantially integrated consciousness. This integrated self is responsible for a person's most important experiences and actions. Hodgson cites Sir Charles Sherrington, who argued that a strong indication of the unity of mind is the fact that a person will only do one main thing at any one time. Sherrington wrote in 1951, "We can have no surer evidence of the integration of the individual than the doing of one main thing at a time." And what then is a main thing? It is always one of those acts we call intentional. Hodgson cites an objection from Nagel, 1986, to the autonomous intentional explanation of human behavior which Hodgson is promoting. Nagel wrote in 1986 that such an explanation cannot explain precisely what it is supposed to explain, namely why I did what I did rather than the alternative that was causally open to me. It says I did it for certain reasons, but does not explain why I don't decide not to do it for other reasons. At some point, this question will either have no answer, or it will have an answer that takes us outside the domain of subjective normative reasons and into the domain of formative causes of my character or personality. Hodgson insists that this objection is fundamentally incorrect. He says, if one accepts the rationality of plausible reasoning, then one must accept that there can be reasoning to a rationally based conclusion which is not compelled by its premises, and that other conclusions may be less rational or even irrational, although not excluded by the premises or indeed by any weighting of commensurable reasons. By less rational, I am suggesting a qualitative rather than a quantitative judgment. In that sense, a complete explanation of action can be given without any need to go to formative causes of one's character. Nagel's point is good only if one rejects the rationality of plausible reasoning and says with Hume and others that it is only a matter of useful habit selected by evolution, and that approach, as I have suggested, undermines all reason and all knowledge. This disagreement with Nagel, claims Hodgson, is close to the heart of the whole problem. He accuses Nagel of making an unstated assumption that an explanation must either be conclusive, and so algorithmic, mechanistic, etc., or else no explanation at all, whereas our whole experience of reasoning and acting is to the contrary. It is of the nature of most of our justifications and explanations of action that they are not conclusive, but nevertheless they may be rational, and different ones may be less rational or irrational.